let's start with the session, and let's cover up the what are the basic points we are going to cover in this session. So first is the ASP.NET Core basic syllabus. Okay, so in this chapter we are going to cover the major aspects of the .NET Core framework, which will be having environment setup. So you guys are using Visual Studio Code, and anything else? Hello.
Yes.
So all are using Visual Studio or any other software you are using, and if anyone is not familiar with the Visual Studio, please let me know. So I guess all are familiar with the Visual Studio, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So basically we will be having the setup first. So basically we are planning to have our .NET Core framework, or planning to cover the chapters which are basically in the .NET Core 6.0 environment. Currently the latest in the market is 6.0. The upcoming versions of .NET Core are 7 and 8. I think they are going to release in this up to the November 2022. Okay, so first is the ASP.NET Core setup. Then we will be creating the web application. This will be the sample web application which we are going to cover in the second chapter. Then we will be focusing on the what is the ASP.NET Core project file and what are their characteristics. Okay, so this point we will be covering, or all our points we are going to cover in a step by step or chapter wise. Okay, so every ASP.NET Core project has its main method. So why the main method comes in the picture, or why there is a main method? If in ASP.NET or earlier framework we were having only the in the console application, we were using the main method only. So why in this ASP.NET Core the main method is comes to the picture? So all these points we are going to cover in this particular chapter. So next is the type of hosting. What is in process hosting, out of process hosting, then what are the Kestrel web server? So these points we are going to cover in this session, in the upcoming session. So next is launch setting, startup file, and app settings.json. In .NET Core framework, there is a separate file for production, then separate file for development. So for development, your app settings.json file, which will be containing the settings of your application, which will be residing in your project. Whenever you are going to build or publish your application, then this separate file for the production environment will be created in your application. Then what are the startup class? What are the startup settings? These settings will be available in the launch setting.json file. Whenever you are going to deploy this launch setting.json file, this file will not be available for deployment in a production environment, but in the dev environment, this file will be available and you can be able to edit or write your own configuration in this file. Okay, so next is the ASP.NET Core middlewares. So what are the middlewares? What are the middlewares? These are static file middlewares, logging middlewares. This all we will be covering in our upcoming session. Next is the request processing pipeline. Okay, so how the request is processed in ASP.NET Core. Then this will be covered in our session as well. So next is the www root, static files middleware, default pages. If anyone have used the earlier frameworks, they are familiar with the default page. Who is use the MVC framework? Anyone is use the MVC ASP.NET MVC framework? Hello.
Yeah, I use.
Okay. So you must be familiar with the default page. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. So the same concept is here, but we have some other configuration in ASP.NET Core. Then the www root folder. In the earlier versions, we were using the content folder. Then inside that content folder, we were able to keep the jQuery files, then images, then bootstrap files, and the earlier MVC framework or earlier web application development framework. Here, there is a www root folder. By using this folder, if you have added some images or jQuery files in these folders, then you can directly access these files, folders, images in your ASP.NET Core application. So how we are going to use these images or folders, that we will be covering in our upcoming session. So next is the static file middlewares. Okay, static file middlewares are already covered. Okay. Next is the developer exception page middleware in ASP.NET Core. So basically, whenever you are using the ASP.NET MVC, there are some default pages we can specify in our web config file, right? So here in the .NET Core or ASP.NET Core, we can use the developer exception pages by using the middleware concept, and that can be used whenever you are getting an exception in your .NET Core or ASP.NET Core application. So basically, there are some differences between ASP.NET Core and .NET Core. The .NET Core is a framework, but the ASP.NET Core is the web development framework. This will be covering. We will be covering this in the next or upcoming chapters as soon as our session progress. So next is the core command line interface. So this is the most important aspect of .NET Core framework. So you can create, publish, run your application by using the command line interface. So CLI tools basically. Okay. So what are its characteristics? What are its uses? That we will be covering in our upcoming sessions. So basically, this will be our ASP.NET Core syllabus for the basic. This will be our basic syllabus for ASP.NET Core development. Okay. So next, we will be having the MVC part. So if anyone is familiar with the .NET framework and its MVC part, they will be having easy to understand. But the people who are new to this framework, who wanted to learn this framework, who are students and who wanted to do their career in the .NET framework or .NET Core framework, which is the latest and developed by the Microsoft, can easily understand this, as the concept we are going to discuss in this session will be easier to understand, okay, and which will be helping you in your career. Okay. So what is the ASP.NET Core MVC? Okay. So basically we are going to cover the core MVC 6.0 version. Okay, so this is the core 6.0 is the latest version of .NET Core. Earlier were 2.1, 3.1, then 5.0, and this is the latest version. Upcoming are the 7 and 8. Okay, so here in .NET Core MVC we will be covering, or we will be creating the .NET Core applications, ASP.NET Core applications, by using Razor pages, okay, MVC pattern. So basically we will be going to cover the major aspects of the .NET Core. We are using the MVC pattern, we will be using the Razor pages framework. Earlier in the .NET framework there was the Razor pages concept, right? So Razor code was available. So basically this is the enhancement, or you can say it is the new version introduced by the Microsoft, which will be covering most of the .NET framework part and the uh, uh, new concepts which are added in this .NET Core framework. Okay, so what is the difference between .NET Core, ASP.NET MVC, and web forms, we will be covering in our discussion. Okay, so next is we will be designing the new application, how to set up your environment from ASP for ASP.NET Core, then what is the project layout file, what is the life cycle of the ASP.NET Core request, how the request processing is done in ASP.NET Core MVC, how it is different from the ASP.NET framework, then what is the models, what is the controllers, what are the views. Okay, that all will be covering in our .NET Core MVC sessions. So basically the designing of the MVC web applications we will be covering in our session, which is the designing ASP.NET Core MVC web applications, and for each chapter we will be going to provide you these notes and separate notes for the each chapters along with the examples screenshot. Okay, or if you want the code, we can send the code if you want. Okay, so next is the configuring middlewares and services in ASP.NET Core. So how these middlewares are configured actually in ASP.NET Core will be covered in our upcoming sessions. So what is the custom middlewares? Custom middlewares are whenever we are creating our own middlewares. These are called as the custom middlewares. So existing middlewares are static file middlewares. So basically, if you wanted to create your own middleware, you can create by using .NET Core. So next is the dependency injection. So dependency injection is loosely coupling of your uh, code or of your classes within an application. So here we will be creating some applications in this session, and we will be showing you the demo for each and every chapter which we are going to cover in our session. Then how to inject a service to a controller. Okay, so this will be covered in our session as well. Okay, so next is the developing controllers and actions. So basically this is the pure MVC part, and what are its action results. Okay, so there can be a different type of action results in our ASP.NET Core MVC part, and whenever any request is coming to the controller, what kind of data is going to send from in a response or from your controller. So how to pass the data, what are the caching mechanisms, what are the action selectors, action filters, authentication filters, authorization filters, that will be covering in our session. So you can create your own custom action filter in the project. We are going to show you in our application by using the ASP.NET Core. Okay. So next is the configuring routes. Then async action methods, routes by using the routes table. So basically, this is the life cycle of the ASP.NET Core MVC project, and that we will be covering in this session. Okay. So next is the view. Every ASP.NET MVC application has three parts. It is the model, view, and controller. Okay. So basically, views are the user interface designing part. So in these views, you can add the razor syntax. Okay. So we will be creating some applications, or we will be showing you in our session that what are the razor part, how to create views, what are the razors, then how to create partial views, layout pages, special views, then view categorization based on the models, helpers, and reusable code in the views. So basically, the views can be used for the user interface, models for creating our models in the application that can be reusable, and controller part will be having your logic. Okay. So that will be covering in our session. So in the models part, we will be having some forms. We will be creating one application MVC by using the MVC application by using. Then we will be creating a model, then working with the forms and validation controls which are used in the .NET Core MVC. So next is the helpers part. So basically, whenever you are going to create the MVC application with the views, there are built-in helpers which you are going to use in your applications. Okay. So basically, we are covering all the helpers, then custom tags, URL helpers, and tag helpers. So next is the model binding. Whenever you are creating the MVC application, the model needs to be binded with the view. So in our session, we will be covering the model behavior, model binder, then form collection model binding, and the other which are discussed here in this model binding tutorial. All will be available to you. So next is the routing part. Okay. So in our session, we will be covering the major parts of the routing using custom routes, attribute routing, routing constant, and default routing part. Next is the validation and data annotation. Similar to the .NET framework or earlier .NET framework MVC, we are having the validation and data annotation portion. In our .NET Core MVC, we are using Fluent validation as well. So we will be having one session with the Fluent validation. So basically, that will be covering some validation part. So this is additional we are going to provide you in this session, and that will help you to create a Fluent validation. Basically, it's a type of design pattern. So basically you can create the application with the Fluent validation class in the your application. So next is the data annotations. So basically, in the earlier framework, there are also the data annotations present. So the same or some additional data annotations are present in the .NET Core MVC part, and that we will be covering in the .NET Core MVC tutorial. Okay. So basically, next is the entity framework in ASP.NET Core. This is the major one, and I know you all will be waiting for this chapter. Okay, so basically we can connect with the SQL Server local database with an entity framework architecture, and we will be showing some. We will be creating one application, and we will show how to create an application with entity framework and by using the SQL Server. Okay. So next is the caching part. So there are various type of caching available in the .NET Core. There are some inbuilt caching in memory caching. Then there are some distributed cache server available externally as well. So there is some Redis cache, you might be heard about it. So in this session, we are trying to cover all these points as well. If we get some time or we will be having any extra session, then we will try to cover the one of the external caching servers, and we will show you the demo how you can access the cache from this server. Okay. So next is the layouts portion, CSS, JavaScript. So basically, these are the view related part and how you are going to design your application by using the Bootstrap as well, using CSS, using JavaScript will be covered in your ASP.NET Core session. Okay, so we can use the CSS and JavaScript, jQuery. Okay, how you can apply a link to the layout by using the layout page, using CSS, using JavaScript and jQuery. Okay, so next is the client side development. So basically all this part which is a part of the client side development we will be covering in our session. What is the unresponsive design as well, and we will show you the demo how to create the responsive creating the page with the responsive design, which can be used in the multiple, which can be stable or which can work or which can be compatible with the various web browsers. So next is the testing and troubleshooting of your ASP.NET Core MVC application. So in this session, we will be covering the exception handling strategies as well, and we will be covering one custom exception uh, strategy in .NET MVC. Then what are the logging? There is some default logging middlewares in .NET Core that we will be covering in our session, and by using the logging mechanism, how we are going to debug our application will be covered in our session. Okay, so next is the testing a controller by using a fake repository, implementing a repository in MVC, and exception handling will be covered. So next is the managing security. So whenever you are creating a new application, the security is the major aspect of your project. So we are going to use the JWT tokens while creating the application in the demo sessions. Okay, so you can be familiar with the OAuth framework in this session as well. So basically we are using the JWT tokens for authentication, role-wise authorization portion, or the role-wise authorization project will be covered in this authorization as well. So next is the various types of attacks and how can you can prevent these attacks in your application will be covered in this session. Use of identity, as I have already discussed, we will be using the JWT tokens, and we will be showing one application by using these tokens by creating one application with the token, and we will be showing it to you. Next is the authorization. how you can create one assembly, and how can you access those assemblies in your project to manage your security in your application will be covered in this session. Okay, next is the CSRF attacks. So how you can avoid this kind of attacks in your application will be covered in our session. So next is the performance and communication. Whenever you are going to develop any application in your company or in your organization, so you have to consider the performance first, as it is the most important aspect of your application. Okay, so if you are if you have created a web API which is responding to the client in a 2 minutes or 3 minutes, it is not good behavior. The client may get frustrated by your application. So the performance is the major aspect of developing a new application. And the communication. So basically we will be covering the caching strategies of ASP.NET Core in this tutorial. Managing the state, how you can keep the state in this, we will be covering in our application. What are the two-way communications that are done in the that are happening in the .NET Core will be covering. Okay. Next is the bundling and minification. Okay, so bundling is basically wrapping up your jQuery files or folders in a separate location, and minification is creating the structure so that the users or the clients or the attackers may not be able to modify that code from your application. So that part will be covered in our sessions as well. Okay, so basically we are covering the bundling and minification part, along with how you can bundle your files in a demo sessions. Okay, so next is we will be creating one hosting environment for and we will be showing how to host your application by using the Azure framework. So this will be done in our session only. Okay, so this you can deploy your applications in self-hosting, IaaS hosting, or on-premises devices. Okay, so basically in our session we will be covering all this deployment portion. Okay, along with the IaaS deployment as well, and Microsoft Azure deployment as well. Okay, so next is the ASP.NET Core Web API Framework. Okay, so basically in this chapter we will be covering all the APIs portion. What is RESTful APIs, what is REST, what is SOAP, and what are the APIs supported by the .NET Core. What are the framework required, along with the SQL Server database. So we will be creating the application by using the APIs. We will be creating APIs by using the SQL Server framework. Okay, along with the Visual Studio 2022 Community Edition, and we will be showing you how we can test our APIs with the Postman app. Okay, so next is we will be showing you project setup and configurations for web APIs along with the .NET 6 and previous version. And there is, of course, you might be familiar with this kind of issue. This is major issue which occurs in the API. This is cause, and we will be showing you how to avoid this kind of errors. What is configuration we have to do in the configuration file or IIS level. So you can be we are going to cover all this in the web API portion. So basically, what are the fundamentals of HTTP verbs? What is the HTTP GET, POST? What are its components? What are the status codes and their categories and their responsibilities as well? We are going to cover in this API chapter. Okay. Then, what are the middlewares and HTTP request pipeline, which is used in the .NET Core Web API framework, will be covered in our session. Okay. So what is the run command, what is the map, what is the use, and what are the next method we will be covering in our session. We will be having the demo for all this, and how we can create the custom middlewares in a separate file will be showing in our demo session as well. Okay. So next portion will be routing in web API. So the people who have already worked with the web API framework will be aware of the routing portion. So here we are going to cover all the aspects of the .NET Core routing, .NET Core Web API's routing mechanism in our sessions. So how you can work with the routing, you will after the session you will be able to create one application by using the web API, and you can be able to route your API method to a specific API endpoint. Okay. So next will be the model binder. Basically this kind of binders that are used in the web API we will be covering in our session. What are the from query, from root, from body attributes which are used in the web API controllers we will be covering in our session. Basically from header is the whenever you are going to request for any API, what is the data you are passing in the headers is called as the from header attribute. Whenever you are going to pass some form data, that is called as the form data. Whenever you are going to pass the information from body, that you have to configure in your controller's method will be covered in our session as well. Okay. Then what is the from root attribute, from query attribute, from properties we will be covering in our session. Okay. So next will be the database modeling and entity framework. So these are the entity framework related tutorials we will be having in our sessions. So how you can manage your application by using the web API and entity framework we will be covering in our session as well. This will be consisting of the DB context, object creation, database connection. Okay. Then generate SQL Server database using the EF core. Okay. Implement data classes and perform migrations, send data to the tables, all will be covering in our session, in our upcoming session. This is the most important topic. Next is the dependency injection DI. So basically we will be having, or we will be giving more time to this particular chapter, as this is the most important chapter whenever you are creating you are building the new API or new web application. So this is the most important chapter, and if you are familiar with this term, then you can work with any languages, any type of coding environments. This concept will be useful to you. Okay. So next is the web API logging. How you are going to manage the logs in our application. So that will be covering in this upcoming tutorials. Okay. So next is the web API action return types. What are the types of responses we will be giving to the API endpoints will be covered in the our upcoming tutorials. So how we can create our own return type, what is the action result, then what is the action result class, we will be covering in our sessions only. So like the MVC, you can also put some validation to the ASP core web APIs as well. Here I have already discussed, we will be showing you this fluent validation architecture. Okay, how to set a fluent validation and implementing this validation in your code, we will be showing. Okay, what is the scaffolding, what is the get post endpoints, what is the put endpoint, what are the delete endpoints. These are the basically useful for your interview. These all APIs or all API related questions will be covered in our session only. Okay, so what are the REST API development best practices? What is the post method? How to transfer data? What is the auto mapper? This is you can use, or this is the concept whenever you are trying to create, or whenever you are trying to convert one object of one class to the another class, we are using the auto mapper. So basically, to minimize your coding environment or your coding efforts, we can use this auto mapper concept in your project. So you can use this and you can avoid your wasting of time. So this will be covering in our ASP.NET Core Web API tutorial as well. Okay, so uh, apart from this, we are trying to cover some design patterns in our session as well. So basically, we will be showing you repository pattern. Okay, then if possible, we can try to cover up the other patterns, but we cannot commit at this point of time that we are going to cover the all other patterns as well, because there are the structural behavioral patterns, and there are more than 10 or 15 design patterns, and we it's not possible to cover all this in our 3 to 4 months tutorial session. So basically, we will be covering the repository design pattern in our tutorial. Okay, then what is the identity core? Then how to assign roles, how to perform the registration, then perform the registration endpoint, which is these all concepts are related to the security in API. Here I have already discussed the JWT tokens. So basically, how to create these tokens and how to implement these tokens, what is the guest login, what is the member login, we all will be covering how to create this kind of tokens, we will be covering in our security part. I think this will be the most important topic in your session. So don't miss it, or if you are going to miss it, we will be providing the recorded sessions to you as well. But this is the most important topics, and you can be able to crack any kind of interviews if you are familiar with these concepts. Okay, then the web API versioning. So what are the versioning of the web APIs in the .NET Core will be covered in our session. Okay, so next is the advanced concepts which we are going to cover along with this syllabus are logging, global error handling, caching. So basically, I have already told you what is the Redis caching. We will be trying to cover in our session. Okay, so additionally, along with this syllabus, we will be going to provide you some additional information which might be helpful to you in your career, or in your if you are going to crack some interviews, or if you are trying to appear for the interview, that will be helpful for you. So next is the server side sorting, filtering, server side paging, then project architectural changes we will be covering in our session only as well. And we will be having uh, the one session on the Swagger document. Okay, what is Swagger will be covered in our session only. Then what are the unit testing frameworks available in the ASP.NET Core APIs we will be covering in the in brief, but it will not be in detail, but we will be trying to cover, or we will be trying to introduce with this testing frameworks in the .NET Core APIs. So next will be the API hosting and deployment. Again, we will be showing you how to deploy these API applications in IIS and how to deploy this application in Azure. The demo session will be provided to you. Okay. So next will consume your web application in Angular application. So suppose you have the application developed in the Angular. Okay, and if you are going to consume the web APIs which are developed in the ASP.NET Core. Okay, so that the real-time session will be provided to you in this tutorial, how you are going to